The diplomatic station orbiting Kepler 442b hummed with nervous energy as representatives from 12 different species gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall. Ambassador Chen Wei straightened his formal robes, watching the massive viewing screen display the approaching human fleet. 300 warships hung in space like steel predators, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that most civilizations could only dream of building. Impressive display of force, rumbled Korthak, the Zephyrian war chief, his 6 arms crossed. In what humans had learned was a gesture of grudging respect. The reptilian giant stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled hide bearing the scars of countless battles across the galaxy's outer rim. Though I wonder if these humans are as dangerous as their reputation suggests. Chen kept his expression neutral, though internally he smiled. The galaxy had heard whispers about humanity's recent victories, but few species truly understood what they were dealing with. Most aliens saw humans as just another emerging civilization, perhaps slightly more aggressive than average, but nothing particularly special. The Nexari delegate, a crystalline being that communicated through harmonic frequencies, chimed softly. Our intelligence suggests these humans possess unusual reflexes and combat instincts. However, their technology appears inferior to most Galactic Council standards. Technology isn't everything, Chen replied quietly, remembering his own military service before joining the diplomatic corps. He had served alongside some of humanity's finest warriors, including the legendary Special Forces units that had earned Earth its fearsome reputation in the outer colonies. The station's AI announced the arrival of the human delegation. Through the airlock stepped a small group that looked almost disappointingly ordinary compared to the exotic aliens filling the hall. Leading them was Admiral Sarah Torres, a compact woman with graying hair and calm eyes. Behind her walked her security detail, 5 individuals in simple black uniforms bearing no obvious rank insignia. What caught Chen's attention was the man at the back of the group. Tall and lean with an easy stride, he moved with the fluid confidence that Chen recognized from his military days. The man's dark eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging threats and escape routes with the unconscious professionalism of someone who had spent years in harm's way. "That must be their bodyguard," whispered the Altarian Council, a pale humanoid with oversized black eyes. "He appears remarkably unremarkable for someone tasked with protecting their leader." The human delegation took their assigned seats at the central table. Admiral Torres began her opening remarks about trade agreements and mutual defense pacts, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. But Chen noticed that several alien delegates were paying more attention to the security team than to the actual negotiations. Korthak, in particular, kept glancing at the human bodyguard with what appeared to be professional curiosity. The Zephyrian had commanded armies across 3 star systems and considered himself an expert judge of warriors. Something about the quiet human intrigued him. As the Admiral continued her presentation about humanity's colonies and industrial capacity, a subtle tension began building in the room. The alien species represented here controlled vast territories and commanded fleets that could reduce entire worlds to ash. They were accustomed to dealing with lesser civilizations from a position of overwhelming superiority. Yet something about these humans felt different. It wasn't their technology. Their weapons and ships were indeed inferior by Galactic Council standards. It wasn't their numbers. Humanity controlled fewer than 50 star systems compared to the thousands claimed by elder races. What unsettled the alien delegates was something far more intangible. The humans carried themselves with an absolute confidence that seemed to ignore the massive disparity in military strength. They spoke of mutual cooperation as equals despite being vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Most disturbing of all, they showed no trace of the deference that younger species typically displayed when meeting their galactic betters. "We're prepared to offer significant technological exchanges," Admiral Torres was saying, her tone businesslike and direct. "Humanity has developed some unique approaches to faster-than-light communication and energy storage that could benefit all council members." The Nexari delegate chimed skeptically. What could a species barely 2 centuries into space travel possibly offer civilizations that have been starfaring for millennia? The question carried an undertone of condescension that made Chen wince internally. He had seen that particular expression on the Admiral's face before, usually right before she made decisions that enemy commanders later regretted. Admiral Torres smiled politely. Sometimes fresh perspectives can solve old problems. We'd be happy to demonstrate some of our innovations if you're interested, but Chen could see that the damage was done. The alien delegates were beginning to treat this as less of a negotiation and more of an amusing curiosity. They saw humanity as an upstart species that needed to be put in its place, taught the proper order of galactic hierarchy. What they didn't understand was that humans had never accepted any hierarchy they didn't create themselves. And the quiet man in the black uniform sitting behind Admiral Torres represented exactly why that attitude had served humanity so well in their brief but violent expansion into the stars. The real negotiations, Chen realized, were about to begin, and they would have nothing to do with trade agreements or defense pacts. The tension in the diplomatic chamber reached a breaking point during the second hour of negotiations. Admiral Torres had just finished explaining humanity's proposal for joint military exercises when Korthak rose from his massive chair, his scales rippling with barely contained aggression. "Enough of this pretense," the Zephyrian war chief growled, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered star systems. "You speak of mutual cooperation, but what you're really asking for is protection. Your species is weak, your territory small, your technology primitive. Why should the Galactic Council treat you as equals when you're clearly inferior in every meaningful way?" The other alien delegates murmured agreement, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of chittering, humming, and electronic beeping. Chen felt his stomach tighten as he watched Admiral Torres's expression remain perfectly calm, though he caught the slight narrowing of her eyes that suggested the woman was fighting to control her temper. "Inferior is an interesting word," Torres replied evenly. "Perhaps you'd care to be more specific about what metrics you're using." Korthak's laugh was like gravel in a cement mixer. "Your entire fleet couldn't defeat a single Zephyrian battle group. Your soldiers use projectile weapons while we wield plasma cannons that can melt through meter-thick armor plating. Your greatest military achievement is conquering a few dozen primitive worlds that couldn't even fight back effectively." The human security team remained motionless throughout this exchange, but Chen noticed that the quiet man in the back had shifted his weight slightly, moving into what looked like a more relaxed position but was actually a combat stance. Chen had seen enough special operations personnel to recognize the subtle preparation for violence. "I see your point," Admiral Torres said, her voice still maddeningly calm. "Physical superiority is certainly important in military matters. Tell me, War Chief Korthak, what's your personal combat record like?" The question seemed to catch Korthak off guard. "I have defeated champions from 17 different species in single combat. I have led successful campaigns against the Hegemony, the Syndicate, and the Outer Colony Rebellion. My combat record is beyond question." Torres nodded thoughtfully. "Impressive, and I'm sure your physical capabilities are far beyond what any human could match. You're stronger, tougher, probably faster in a straight line. Your natural weapons could tear through our armor like tissue paper." Korthak's chest swelled with pride, his scales brightening to a more vibrant shade of blue. "Finally, you begin to understand the natural order. Humans are a young species untested by true warfare. You lack the evolutionary advantages that make a species truly dangerous." "You're absolutely right about our physical limitations," Torres agreed. "In fact, I'd be willing to bet that any one of your warriors could defeat our best soldier in a fair fight." The war chief's eyes lit up with predatory interest. "Are you suggesting a demonstration?" Chen felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen where conversations like this led during his military service, and it never ended well for someone. Usually the someone who thought they understood what they were dealing with. "Just a friendly match," Torres said with an innocent smile that Chen found deeply unsettling. "Nothing serious? Perhaps hand-to-hand combat, non-lethal, just to settle this question of physical superiority once and for all." The alien delegates began chittering excitedly among themselves. The prospect of watching a human attempt to fight a Zephyrian warrior was clearly entertaining to them. Korthak himself seemed almost amused by the suggestion. "Very well," the war chief rumbled. "I will select one of my finest warriors to demonstrate why the strong rule the weak. Do you have a champion you'd like to volunteer for this lesson in humility?" Torres turned to look at her security team. "Marcus, would you mind?" The quiet man in the back row stood up slowly, and Chen finally got a good look at him. Marcus appeared to be in his 30s with short-cropped dark hair and the kind of lean build that suggested endurance rather than raw power. He wasn't particularly tall or imposing, and next to the alien delegates he looked almost fragile. "It would be my pleasure, Admiral," Marcus said, his voice carrying a slight accent that Chen couldn't quite place. His tone was polite, professional, and completely devoid of any concern about what he was agreeing to do. Korthak gestured to one of his own security team, a massive Zephyrian who stood at least half a meter taller than Marcus and probably outweighed him by a factor of 3. The warrior's scales were a deep purple color that Chen had learned indicated extensive combat experience, and his 6 arms each ended in claws that could probably punch through steel plating. "Thornex is one of my most skilled fighters," Korthak announced with obvious pride. "He has never been defeated in single combat, and his reflexes are among the fastest recorded for our species." Marcus nodded politely to his opponent, apparently unbothered by the massive disparity in size and obvious lethality. "Nice to meet you, Thornex. Should we clear some space?" As the delegates hastily rearranged themselves to create an impromptu fighting arena in the center of the chamber, Chen caught Admiral Torres's eye. The woman winked at him, and Chen suddenly realized that this entire scenario had been carefully orchestrated from the moment the negotiations began. The humans hadn't come here to beg for acceptance into the Galactic Council. They had come to deliver a message, and they were about to demonstrate why their species had earned its reputation the hard way. The diplomatic chamber had been hastily converted into an arena, with the alien delegates forming a rough circle around the cleared space in the center. Thornex stood in his fighting stance, all 6 arms spread wide, his purple scales rippling with anticipation. The massive Zephyrian warrior moved with surprising grace for something his size, each step calculated and precise. Marcus stood across from him, hands at his sides, looking for all the world like he was waiting for a bus rather than preparing to fight a creature that could probably tear him in half. The contrast was almost comical, the towering alien death machine versus the unremarkable human in a simple black uniform. "The rules are simple," Korthak announced with obvious relish. "Hand-to-hand combat only, no weapons. Fight continues until one participant yields or is unable to continue. This should demonstrate the natural superiority of evolved warrior species over primitive humans." Chen noticed that Marcus didn't react to the insult, just continued his relaxed stance while studying his opponent with calm, analytical eyes. There was something deeply unsettling about the human's complete lack of concern, especially given what he was about to face. The Nexari delegate chimed softly. "Perhaps we should establish medical protocols? The human appears quite fragile compared to his opponent." "I appreciate the concern," Admiral Torres replied with that same innocent smile. "But Marcus has excellent health insurance." Thornex began moving forward, his primary arms extended while his secondary arms remained ready to strike or grapple. The alien's combat style was based on overwhelming opponents with superior reach and multiple simultaneous attacks, a technique that had proven devastatingly effective against every species he had encountered. Marcus waited until the Zephyrian was almost within striking distance, then moved. What happened next defied every expectation in the room. Instead of backing away or trying to avoid the alien's massive reach advantage, Marcus stepped directly into the attack, his body flowing like water around Thornex's grasping claws. The human's movement was so smooth and economical that it took Chen a moment to realize what had actually occurred. Thornex's massive fist whistled through empty air, where Marcus had been standing a fraction of a second earlier. The human had somehow slipped inside the alien's guard, moving with a speed and precision that seemed to violate several laws of physics. Before Thornex could react, Marcus's elbow connected with the base of the alien's skull in a strike that was barely visible to the watching delegates. The effect was immediate and devastating. Thornex's nervous system, designed to control 6 arms and a complex reptilian physiology, suddenly found itself dealing with a precisely targeted disruption. The massive warrior's legs buckled, his 6 arms spasming uncontrollably as his motor functions failed. But Marcus wasn't finished. As Thornex began to fall, the human moved again, his hands a blur of controlled violence. Chen counted at least 6 additional strikes, each one landing with surgical precision, on nerve clusters that most alien species didn't even know they possessed. The entire exchange lasted less than 3 seconds. Thornex hit the deck plating with a thunderous crash that shook the entire chamber. The mighty Zephyrian warrior lay motionless, his breathing shallow but steady, his 6 arms twitching occasionally as his nervous system attempted to re-establish control over his paralyzed body. Marcus straightened his uniform and looked down at his fallen opponent with what appeared to be genuine concern. "He'll be fine in about 20 minutes, he announced to the stunned silence. "Might have a headache, but no permanent damage." The alien delegate stared in shocked disbelief. Korthak himself seemed incapable of processing what he had just witnessed. His most skilled warrior, a champion who had never been defeated, had been dismantled by a human who looked like he worked in an office building. "That's impossible," the Altarian council whispered. "Thornex is 3 times his size, has superior reflexes and 4 additional limbs. How could a primitive human possibly—" "Oh, Marcus isn't primitive," Admiral Torres interrupted cheerfully. "He's what we call a Navy SEAL. Elite special operations trained to neutralize threats regardless of size, species, or technological advantage. We've found that when you can't rely on being stronger or tougher than your enemies, you have to be smarter and faster instead." Chen felt a chill of understanding wash over him. He was beginning to comprehend exactly what humanity represented in galactic terms. While other species had evolved natural weapons and superior physical capabilities, humans had done something far more dangerous. They had become apex predators through pure skill and determination. Marcus knelt beside the paralyzed Thornex, checking the alien's pulse and pupil response with practiced efficiency. "Vitals are good," he reported. "Might want to keep him lying down when he comes around. Neural disruption can cause vertigo for a few hours. You fought with honor," Korthax finally managed, his voice subdued. "But this proves nothing." Thornex was unprepared for human tactics. In a real battle with weapons and armor, he never got to finish the sentence. The diplomatic station's emergency alarm suddenly screamed to life, red warning lights bathing the chamber in crimson illumination. The station's AI spoke with mechanical urgency. "Alert. Unknown vessels approaching. Configuration suggests hostile intent. All personnel prepare for possible combat engagement." Through the viewing windows, Chen could see shapes moving against the starfield. Sleek, predatory vessels with hull configurations he didn't recognize. They were moving fast and heading straight for the diplomatic station with obvious aggressive intent. Admiral Torres checked her tactical display, her expression shifting from diplomatic politeness to cold professional focus. 12 vessels, unknown configuration, closing fast. Marcus assessment? Marcus had smoothly transitioned from concerned medic back to lethal operative, his entire demeanor changing in an instant. Raider formation, probably hegemony remnants. Standard hit-and-run tactics, they're jamming communications so they mean business. The alien delegates were beginning to panic, their various species' flight responses creating chaos in the chamber. But Chen noticed that the humans remained perfectly calm, as if hostile attacks on diplomatic stations were just another day at the office. "Time to find out what human tactics look like when we actually try," Admiral Torres said quietly. The diplomatic station shuddered under the first volley of plasma fire, the lights flickering as energy cascaded through the hull. Through the massive viewing windows, Chen watched the attacking vessels wheel around for another pass, their sleek forms bristling with weapons that could reduce the station to scrap metal within minutes. "Station defense grid is down," the AI announced with mechanical calm. "Primary shields failing. Estimated survival time, 12 minutes. Panic rippled through the alien delegates as they realized their situation. The Nexari delegate was transmitting frantic harmonic distress calls, while the Altarian council had curled into a protective ball, his oversized eyes squeezed shut in terror. Even Korthax appeared shaken, his 6 arms trembling as he tried to comprehend how quickly their supposed position of safety had evaporated. Admiral Torres tapped her communication device. "Captain Rodriguez, status report." The response crackled with static from the enemy jamming. 300 human vessels holding position at maximum range, Admiral. "We can reach the station in 47 minutes, but those raiders will have finished their business long before then." "Understood. Maintain position unless I give direct orders otherwise." Chen stared at her in shock. "Admiral, with respect, you have 300 warships out there. Why aren't they moving to defend the station?" Torres's smile was cold as winter space. "Because the best lessons are learned through direct experience. Marcus, how long until those raiders complete their boarding maneuver?" Marcus had taken position near one of the chamber's exits, his relaxed stance belied by the predatory alertness in his eyes. 6 minutes until they dock. Probably a 20-man strike team. Maybe 30 if they're feeling confident. Standard smash-and-grab operation. Kill anyone important, steal anything valuable, blow the station on their way out. Korthax struggled to his feet, his earlier arrogance replaced by desperate urgency. You cannot simply stand there and allow this to happen. Use your fleet. Defend this station? Why? Torres asked mildly. A few minutes ago you were explaining how inferior humans are to proper warrior species. Surely evolved fighters like yourself can handle a few raiders without assistance from primitive soldiers like us. The war chief's scales flushed deep red with shame and rage. This is not the time for wounded pride. Lives are at stake. You're absolutely right, Torres agreed. Lives are at stake. The question is, whose lives matter enough to risk human blood protecting them? The implications of her words hit the alien delegates like a physical blow. For centuries, the Galactic Council had operated under the assumption that younger species should be grateful for any attention from their evolved betters. The idea that humans might simply choose not to help had never occurred to them. Another impact shook the station, and Chen heard the distinctive whine of energy weapons cutting through the outer hull. The raiders were beginning their boarding operation, and once they broke through the station's defenses, the diplomatic conference would become a hostage situation at best, a massacre at worst. Admiral, Chen said quietly, whatever point you're trying to make, innocent people are about to die. Torres looked at him with genuine warmth for the first time since the negotiations began. Ambassador Chen, you've served with distinction in both military and diplomatic roles. Your record shows consistent courage and integrity. I would very much like to prevent your death today. Then use your fleet. I can't do that, Torres replied with what sounded like genuine regret. Because I need these delegates to understand something fundamental about humanity's place in the galaxy. And sometimes the only way to teach a lesson is to let people experience the consequences of their assumptions. The station's internal alarms shifted to a new pitch as hull breaches were detected. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the facility. But Chen could hear the distant sound of explosive charges and weapons fire as the raiders fought their way through the station's minimal security. Marcus checked his tactical display. Boarding party just reached level 7. Professional job, they're moving fast and eliminating resistance efficiently. Maybe 5 minutes before they reach this level. What are their species profiles? Torres asked. Mixed group. Looks like hegemony remnants. Couple of Zephyrians, some Altarian shock troops, at least one Nexari combat specialist. All battle-hardened veterans with military-grade equipment. Korthax went very still. Hegemony remnants? But we defeated them years ago. Their fleet was scattered, their leadership eliminated. Apparently some survivors decided that piracy was a viable career change, Torres observed. And they seemed to have remembered which species were responsible for destroying their civilization. The implications were clear. This wasn't a random raid, it was targeted revenge against Galactic Council members. The raiders were specifically hunting the delegates in this chamber, and they had both the motivation and the skills necessary to complete their mission. You planned this, the Altarian Council whispered in horror. You arranged for this attack to happen during our negotiations. Torres laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. Council, I may be human, but I'm not omnipotent. I can't arrange pirate attacks on command. What I can do is recognize an opportunity when I see one. Another explosion, much closer this time. The lights went out entirely for several seconds before emergency power kicked in, bathing the chamber in dim red illumination. Through the darkness, Chen could hear the sound of advancing footsteps and harsh alien voices, coordinating their assault. Marcus drew a device from his belt, something that looked like a simple communication unit but felt wrong, in ways that made Chen's combat instincts scream warnings. 4 minutes, Admiral. Still want me to handle this alone? Your call, Sergeant. But remember, we're here to educate, not eliminate. Marcus nodded and moved toward the chamber's main entrance. His movements flowing with the deadly grace that Chen was beginning to understand was humanity's true evolutionary advantage. Not strength or natural weapons or superior technology, but the simple fact that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than themselves. Wait, Korthax called out desperately. What are you doing? There are at least 20 armed raiders out there. Marcus paused at the doorway and looked back with a smile that would have been perfectly normal on a suburban father's face, except for the eyes which held the cold promise of professionally applied violence. 21, actually. He corrected politely. I'll be right back. The silence that followed Marcus's departure was deafening, broken only by the distant sounds of weapons fire and explosions echoing through the station's corridors. The alien delegates huddled in the center of the chamber, their earlier arrogance replaced by raw terror, as they listened to the approaching sounds of combat. Admiral Torres had taken a position near the viewing windows, apparently unconcerned by the fact that armed raiders were systematically fighting their way through the station, toward their location. She checked her tactical display occasionally, but otherwise seemed to be treating the entire situation as a minor inconvenience. How can you be so calm? The Nexari delegate chimed frantically. Your soldier just went to face an entire raiding party alone.
He'll be slaughtered.
Marcus has been in worse situations, Torres replied with complete confidence. He once held off an entire syndicate assault battalion for 6 hours while waiting for extraction. 21 Pirates is practically a vacation for him. Chen found himself straining to hear what was happening in the corridors beyond the chamber. The sounds of combat had intensified briefly after Marcus left, then suddenly shifted to something that sounded less like a firefight and more like systematic extermination. Sharp, precise bursts of energy fire punctuated by the occasional scream or crash. Impossible, Korthax muttered, his scales rippling with nervous energy. No single warrior, regardless of species, could engage 21 armed opponents simultaneously. The mathematics alone. His words were cut off by a particularly loud explosion somewhere nearby, followed by absolute silence. The alien delegates exchanged terrified glances as they realized that all sounds of combat had stopped completely. Either your soldier is dead, or all the raiders are dead, the Altarian Council whispered. And given the odds, Marcus isn't dead, Torres said with absolute certainty. Trust me, when Marcus dies, it won't be quietly. 5 minutes passed in tense silence before they heard footsteps approaching the chamber. Single set, moving at an unhurried pace, completely relaxed. The aliens tensed for what they assumed would be their final moments as armed raiders burst through the entrance. Instead, Marcus walked calmly back into the chamber, his black uniform slightly rumpled but otherwise unmarked. He was cleaning what appeared to be blood from a small device that Chen now realized was some kind of advanced weapon, disguised as a communication unit. All clear. Admiral, Marcus reported in the same professional tone he had used earlier. 21 hostiles neutralized. Station security can resume normal operations. The alien delegate stared at him in shocked silence. Korthax was the first to find his voice. 21? You eliminated 21 armed raiders? Alone? Marcus shrugged. 19 raiders and 2 ship crew who tried to run back to their transport. Standard counterboarding operation. Nothing complicated. Show us, Torres said suddenly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Admiral? Show them what you found out there. I think our diplomatic friends need to understand exactly what they witnessed. Marcus nodded and activated a holographic display from his tactical unit. Images flickered to life above the device, showing the corridors immediately outside the chamber. What the aliens saw defied every assumption they had made about human capabilities. The bodies were scattered throughout the hallway system in positions that told a clear story. The raiders had advanced in standard formation, moving with military precision and proper covering fire. They should have been unstoppable against a single opponent regardless of species. Instead, they had been systematically dismantled with surgical precision. Marcus had used the station's own architecture against them, turning corners into kill zones and emergency bulkheads into tactical advantages. Each raider had been eliminated with minimal ammunition expenditure, most of them taken down by precisely targeted shots that had disabled them instantly. This Zephyrian here, Marcus pointed to one of the bodies, was their leader, judging by his equipment and tactical positioning, probably a former hegemony shock trooper. Very skilled, excellent reflexes, superior firepower. He highlighted another section of the corridor. These 3 Altarians were providing cover fire with military-grade plasma rifles. Coordinated movements, proper field discipline, exactly the kind of opponents that should have overwhelmed a single human. Then how? Korthax demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus looked genuinely surprised by the question. Speed, positioning, and superior tactics. They were expecting to fight station security, undertrained guards with basic equipment. They weren't prepared for someone who had spent years learning how to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and better armed. Admiral Torres stepped forward, her expression serious for the first time since the negotiations began. This is what you don't understand about humanity. We didn't evolve as the strongest species or the fastest or the most naturally gifted warriors. We evolved as the most adaptable. She gestured toward Marcus, who was still calmly reviewing tactical data, as if mass combat was simply another job skill. Every human soldier is trained from the beginning to assume that their enemies will be superior in every conventional way. Stronger, tougher, better equipped, more numerous. So we learned to win by being smarter. Chen was beginning to understand the true scope of what he was witnessing. This wasn't just a demonstration of human combat capabilities. It was a fundamental shift in galactic power structures. For centuries, the Galactic Council had operated under the assumption that physical superiority and technological advancement were the primary measures of military effectiveness. Humanity was proving that assumption wrong in the most direct way possible. Your fleet, the Nexari delegate chimed weakly. 300 ships holding position. You could have ended this in minutes, Torres nodded. We could have, but that would have taught you the wrong lesson. If we had simply overwhelmed the raiders with superior firepower, you would have concluded that humans win through technological advantage. You might have started working on ways to match or exceed our weapons technology. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Instead, you've learned that a single human soldier can eliminate an entire raiding party without breaking a sweat. Now you have to consider what 300 ships full of soldiers like Marcus might be capable of accomplishing. The chamber fell silent as the alien delegates contemplated this new reality. Everything they thought they knew about galactic military hierarchy had just been turned upside down. Humanity wasn't asking to join the Galactic Council as a junior partner. They were announcing their arrival as a major power, whether the Council liked it or not. The aftermath of the raid brought a profound silence to the diplomatic chamber, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Where previously the alien delegates had radiated condescension and dismissive superiority, now there was something approaching genuine respect mixed with carefully controlled fear. Korthak stood over Thornex, who was finally beginning to regain consciousness from Marcus's earlier demonstration. The massive Zephyrian warrior's 6 arms were still trembling as his nervous system slowly re-established control, but his eyes were alert and focused. When he saw Marcus standing nearby, his scales immediately flushed a pale color that Chen had learned indicated submission or acknowledgement of superior status. War Chief, Thornex whispered hoarsely. What happened? I remember engaging the human in combat then. He struggled to sit up, his movements unsteady and uncertain. You lost, Korthax replied bluntly, in less than 3 seconds. Against someone half your size using nothing but his bare hands? Thornex's eyes widened in disbelief, then slowly shifted to Marcus with something approaching professional appreciation. Impossible. My reflexes are irrelevant, Marcus interrupted gently. Speed isn't about how fast you can move. It's about how fast you can think, adapt, and exploit your opponent's assumptions. You assumed I would fight like other species you've encountered. That assumption got you defeated. Admiral Torres moved to the center of the chamber, her presence commanding immediate attention from every delegate present. The easy diplomatic politeness was gone, replaced by the absolute authority of someone who had just demonstrated that humanity was not to be underestimated. Let's discuss the real purpose of this meeting, she announced. You've all heard reports about human military activities in the outer colonies, stories about impossible victories, about small human forces defeating vastly superior alien armies. You probably assumed those reports were exaggerated propaganda. The Nexari delegate chimed softly, a harmonic pattern that Chen's translator rendered as nervous uncertainty. Our intelligence network suggested that human victories were achieved through technological advantages or strategic surprise, not individual combat superiority. Your intelligence networks were wrong, Torres replied flatly, because they were analyzing human warfare through the lens of conventional galactic military doctrine. They assumed we fight the same way everyone else, fights through superior firepower and overwhelming force. She gestured toward the holographic display still showing the aftermath of Marcus's encounter with the raiders. What you witnessed today wasn't unusual by human standards. Marcus is highly trained, but he's not unique. Every human military unit includes soldiers with similar capabilities. Chen felt a chill as he began to comprehend the true implications. If every human soldier was capable of the kind of performance they had just witnessed, then humanity's relatively small military forces represented a level of combat effectiveness that the galaxy had never encountered. The Hegemony War, Korthax said suddenly, his voice heavy with dawning realization. The reports from the Outer Rim. Human forces consistently defeating armies 10 times their size, capturing fortified positions that should have been impregnable, eliminating enemy leadership with surgical precision. All true, Torres confirmed. What you're dealing with isn't a lucky young species that happened to stumble onto some advanced technology. You're dealing with a civilization that has spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to be the deadliest thing in any given environment. The Altarian Council uncurled from his protective posture, his oversized black eyes reflecting fear and confusion. But your technology is inferior. Your ships are slower, your weapons less powerful, your defensive systems primitive by Council standards. Marcus stepped forward, his expression almost apologetic. Technology is a tool, not a crutch. Better equipment helps, but it can't replace proper training and tactical thinking. Some of our most effective operations have been conducted with equipment that was decades out of date. He activated another display, this one showing tactical analyses from recent human military actions. These are engagement records from the past 2 years. Notice the pattern. Human forces consistently achieve objectives while sustaining minimal casualties, regardless of enemy technological advantages. The data was devastating in its implications. Human military units had engaged and defeated hegemony forces equipped with weapons that could have reduced entire human cities to ash. They had captured fortified positions defended by species with natural armor that could deflect small arms fire. They had eliminated targets that other species would have required orbital bombardment to neutralize. How is this possible? The Nexari delegate demanded. Physical laws don't change. Superior technology should provide decisive advantages. Should, Torres agreed. But technology only matters if you can bring it to bear effectively. And humans have become very good at preventing enemies from using their advantages. She highlighted specific engagement records. Here, a human special forces team eliminated an entire hegemony command center while the enemy was calling in orbital strikes. The bombardment never had a chance to begin because there was nobody left to coordinate it. Another record appeared. This engagement shows human forces capturing a heavily fortified position by infiltrating through what the defenders thought were impregnable security barriers. The aliens had superior sensors, better weapons, overwhelming numerical advantage, and they never saw the attack coming. Until it was over, Chen was beginning to understand that this entire diplomatic conference had been planned as something far more significant than trade negotiations. Admiral Torres wasn't here to ask for humanity's admission to the Galactic Council. She was here to announce that humanity had already established itself as a major galactic power and was now prepared to dictate terms. What do you want? Korthax asked finally, his voice subdued. If you're not here seeking membership in the Council, if you're already capable of achieving whatever objectives you choose through military force, then why are you talking to us at all? Torres smiled, and for the first time since Chen had met her, the expression seemed genuinely warm. Because we prefer cooperation to conquest. Humanity has no interest in ruling the galaxy through fear. We'd rather be partners with species that can treat us as equals. She paused, letting that sink in. But we will not be patronized, dismissed, or treated as a junior member of someone else's hierarchy. The galaxy is changing, and the Galactic Council can either adapt to that reality or be replaced by something more pragmatic. The threat was politely stated, but absolutely clear. Humanity was offering partnership on equal terms, but they were also demonstrating that they had the power to simply take what they wanted if cooperation proved impossible. Marcus finished reviewing the tactical data and looked up at the assembled delegates. For what it's worth, I hope you choose cooperation. Fighting humans is unpleasant work, and we'd rather spend our time building things than breaking them. His tone was conversational, almost friendly, which somehow made the statement even more intimidating than if he had delivered it as a threat. 6 months after the diplomatic conference, Ambassador Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Terran embassy, watching human and alien workers collaborate on the expansion of the joint research facility below. The sight would have been unthinkable before that day when Marcus had casually dismantled 21 armed raiders and fundamentally shifted the balance of galactic power. The Galactic Council had undergone what historians were already calling the Great Realignment. 3 species had voluntarily restructured their military doctrines after conducting joint training exercises with human forces. The results had been so shocking that the Zephyrian High Command had requested permanent human military advisors for the first time in their civilization's history. Korthax approached across the deck, his scales now bearing the formal markings that indicated his new position as Zephyrian ambassador to the human colonial authority. The massive warrior moved with the same fluid grace as before, but there was a fundamental difference in how he carried himself. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the professional respect of one apex predator acknowledging another. "Ambassador Chen," Korthax rumbled in greeting, "I bring word from the council sessions. The trade agreements have been finalized and the Mutual Defense Pact has passed preliminary approval." Chen nodded, still somewhat amazed by how quickly everything had changed. "Any resistance from the older council members?" "Less than expected," Korthax admitted. "After the demonstration exercises, most species have concluded that cooperation with humanity is vastly preferable to the alternative. The Nexari Collective has already begun implementing human tactical doctrines in their border conflicts, and the results have been impressive." Through the viewing windows, Chen could see the human fleet maintaining its patrol routes around the diplomatic station. 300 ships that had once seemed like a modest show of force now represented something entirely different, a promise that humanity would protect its interests and allies with overwhelming competence. "How is Thornax adapting to the new training regimens?" Chen asked. Korthax's scales rippled in what Chen had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of amused respect. "He has become something of a legend among our warriors. The fighter who lasted 3 full seconds against a human special forces operative. Our recruits study recordings of his defeat the way your military academies analyze famous battles." The irony wasn't lost on Chen. Humanity's most effective diplomatic tool had turned out to be raw demonstration of their military capabilities. By refusing to rely on technology or numerical superiority, they had forced the galaxy to confront an uncomfortable truth. That skill and determination could overcome almost any conventional advantage. Marcus emerged from the embassy's security station, still wearing his simple black uniform but now bearing the insignia that marked him as senior military advisor to the colonial authority. His promotion had been inevitable after every major council species had requested human training assistance for their own special forces units. "Admiral Torres sends her regards," Marcus reported to Chen. "The Senate back on Earth has approved the expansion of military exchange programs. Looks like we'll be training allied forces for the foreseeable future." Chen smiled at the understatement. What Marcus was politely describing as training assistance was actually the complete restructuring of galactic military doctrine. Human tactical innovations were spreading through council forces like wildfire, producing results that were forcing every major power to reconsider their fundamental assumptions about warfare. "Any word on the hegemony remnants?" Korthax asked. Marcus's expression turned slightly predatory. "The last organized group surrendered to human forces 3 weeks ago. Turns out that once word spread about what happened to raiding parties that targeted human interests, recruitment became extremely difficult for outlaw organizations." The pragmatic brutality of the statement was delivered in Marcus's usual conversational tone, but Chen could see the effect it had on Korthax. The massive Zephyrian warrior's scales flushed with what Chen recognized as instinctive respect for superior predatory efficiency. "The galaxy is becoming a safer place," Chen observed, which was true in ways that still amazed him. Human intervention in regional conflicts had produced peace agreements that had eluded diplomatic efforts for decades. When both sides of a dispute knew that continued fighting might attract human attention and human methods of conflict resolution, negotiated settlements, suddenly became much more attractive. "Speaking of safety," Marcus said, "we've received another request for peacekeeping assistance. The Altarian-Kandrian border dispute has escalated to actual shooting, and both sides are asking for human mediation." Korthax's scales darkened with concern. "The Kandrians are a warrior culture. They believe that might makes right, and they have refused all previous mediation attempts. What makes you think they'll accept human intervention? Marcus pulled up a tactical display showing recent engagement records. Because 3 days ago, a Kandrian battle group encountered a human patrol fleet near the disputed system. The Kandrians opened fire first. What happened? Chen asked, though he suspected he already knew. Standard human response. The patrol fleet disabled the entire Kandrian battle group without destroying a single ship or causing any casualties. Then they transmitted detailed tactical analyses explaining exactly how the engagement could have gone differently if the humans had chosen lethal force. The implications hit both Chen and Korthax simultaneously. The Kandrians, who had built their entire culture around military superiority, had just been casually swatted aside by a human patrol, not even a proper military fleet, just a routine border patrol. They requested mediation 6 hours later, Marcus added with obvious satisfaction. Chen found himself laughing, despite the serious nature of the conversation. In less than a year, humanity had transformed from an unknown species seeking diplomatic recognition to the galaxy's de facto arbiters of military conflict, not through conquest or threats, but through consistent demonstration that human capabilities exceeded everyone else's ability to comprehend them. The Council is adapting faster than anyone expected, Korthax observed. Fear is a powerful motivator, but respect is proving to be even stronger. Your species has earned something that the galaxy hasn't seen in millennia. Genuine acknowledgement of superiority without resentment. Marcus looked genuinely surprised by the observation. We're not superior. We're just different. Every species has evolutionary advantages. You're stronger, the Nexari are more intelligent in certain areas, the Altarians have better sensory capabilities. We just happened to evolve in an environment where being adaptable mattered more than being specialized. And that, Chen realized, is exactly why this is working. Humanity isn't trying to replace the existing order. You're improving it. Other species get to keep their strengths while learning human tactical flexibility. The observation was more profound than it initially appeared. For the first time in galactic history, a major power shift was occurring through cooperation rather than conquest. Humanity was demonstrating that being the apex predator didn't require eliminating all other hunters. Sometimes it just meant teaching them better hunting techniques. Marcus checked his tactical display one final time, then looked out at the mixed human and alien crews working together on the research facility. Admiral Torres was right about one thing. We prefer building to breaking. And it turns out the galaxy is full of species worth building something with. As Chen watched the sunset paint the diplomatic station in golden light, he reflected on how completely the galaxy had changed. 6 months ago, humanity had been an unknown factor. Today, they were the cornerstone of a new galactic order based on merit rather than ancestry, cooperation rather than dominance. And it had all started with Marcus breaking a Navy SEAL's nose in a diplomatic chamber, then losing his skull 10 seconds later to 21 raiders who thought they understood what they were fighting. Sometimes, Chen thought, the most important lessons really were learned through direct experience.